All right, Proposition 56, Meredith Worden.
I'll start, Carolyn Chu.
Or Carolyn Chu.
With the Legislative Analyst's Office. Proposition 56 would increase the taxes on tobacco by $2. So the tax on a pack of cigarettes would go from 87 cents to $2.87, and the tax on other tobacco products like cigars and these sorts of things would go from $1.37 to $3.37. Notably, the measure also extends taxes on tobacco to electronic cigarettes, particularly liquid containing nicotine. Previously, those products had not been taxed like tobacco products by the state. We estimate that the revenue from this measure, the net revenue from this measure, would be between about $1 billion and $1.4 billion, depending on the overall consumer response to the price increase. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Worden, to describe where the money would go.
So as Carolyn mentioned, we estimate about $1 billion would be generated under this measure in new revenues. The measure specifies that these new revenues would go into a special fund and be allocated for specific purposes. On page 50 of your voter guide, there's a quickie cheat chart for you to see where those monies would be allocated. It's up here on the screen for you. First, those monies that are generated would go towards replacing revenues lost due to lower tobacco consumption as a result of this measure. Second, those monies would then support 5% of remaining funds towards administration of the tax program by the Board of Equalization. Third, monies would be specifically allocated to state entities. These amounts are specified in the measure, for example, the State Department of Public Health for the state dental program. And finally, the remaining funds, most of which would go to state programs, would be allocated at percent-wise. 82% would go to the state's Medi-Cal program, which we've heard a little bit about before, related to other measures that provides low-income health care to Californians. It's about a $95 billion program. We estimate about 82% of the remaining funds would be about $700 million to $1 billion going towards that program. The remaining amounts, 11%, would go towards the Department of Public Health's tobacco control program, 5% towards UCs for the tobacco-related disease program, and 2% remaining funds would go to various school programs in the Department of Education. With regard to the fiscal impacts, again, this would generate new revenues, about $1 billion, as well as our estimates on state and local government healthcare costs. Significant research has shown that these tobacco impacts health pretty significantly. There's significant research on that. So as a result, this measure would reduce state and local spending on healthcare costs. However, in the long run, the net long-term fiscal impact of this measure is not known on state and local government healthcare costs and other costs as a result of longevity and uncertainties around the health impacts and costs around e-cigarettes and other effects.
Great. So in support, we have the California Democratic Party. We have other Democratic clubs. And then in opposition, we have the Republican Party, Libertarian, and Peace and Freedom parties. In support, we have a number of civic and environmental organizations, educational organizations, school districts, business associations, and unions. And then in opposition, this will shock you, Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds, and a bunch of other tobacco companies, and the State Fraternal Order of Police and sheriffs. In support, we have a bunch of Democratic officials, and in opposition, one other Republican official. And then in support, we have 3 newspapers that have endorsed it. And the spending, also shocking, $56 million in opposition from tobacco companies. And in favor of it, we have $21 million that it's from hospital organizations, unions, medical associations, dental associations, the American Cancer Society, so sort of health groups. Questions?
I assume one of the reasons that the police and the sheriffs are against that because they're foreseeing an increased cost of enforcement. that there will be more illegal tobacco sales. So there's no money allocated in this towards those needs. That was a question.
So we can't opine as to kind of why the measure specifies according to the various allocations that we had displayed above. We would have to ask the proponents on that. But it does specify, as we had seen earlier, where those monies would be going.
Some of which do go to enforcement for smuggling of tobacco products and that sort of thing, and some for prevention of purchase by underage individuals.
Other questions? Oh, we have one in the middle.
Yes, are things like nicotine patches going to be taxed?
No, products that are approved as smoking cessation devices are not taxed currently and would not be taxed under the measure.
Okay, and one last.
Would the panel be willing to comment on the arguments against statement that Proposition 56 cheats schools out of at least $600 million per year?
What I can say is that previous voter-approved taxes on tobacco products have put the funds generated from the taxes into special funds. Special funds are not part of the Proposition 98 guarantee calculation. The Proposition 98 guarantee calculation is how the state determines how much money schools should receive. And similarly, this measure also puts the funding into a special fund, just like the previous two voter-approved tobacco taxes.
Thank you.